This is the special topics presentation for Sociology 354 by Robert Rayner, covering poverty and obesity, entitled Give Us This Day Our Daily Bread. Obesity is a major risk factor that leads to increased chances of a person being affected by heart disease, diabetes, stroke, depression, sleep apnea, osteoarthritis, and additional health risks. Nearly half of children today are either obese or run the risk of becoming obese due to several issues. Latest findings by Yu and Wang have shown that the level of obesity among children has increased across all racial, ethnic, social-economical groups, ages, and gender. Additionally, the rate of obesity is larger for lower-income children than middle-income groups. There are both short and long-term consequences. Obesity has negative health implications for individuals, and it has adverse effects for society in forms of poorer overall health and higher health care costs. Childhood obesity is associated with increased blood pressure, increased total cholesterol, insulin resistance, and sleep apnea. Socially, these obese children are more likely to be stigmatized, rejected, and victimized, and less likely to be friended. Obese children are more at risk for poor academic performance. Researchers Lieb, Snow, and DeBoer have found out and predicted that children born today will have a shorter life expectancy than those of their parents due to the increased rate of obesity. This is the first generation to happen in the U.S. since the Civil War where life expectancy will be shorter than their parents. Poverty contributes to the growing obesity epidemic in American inner cities and the poor due to a lack of fresh food sources and alternatives available to families, the prevalence of fast food options, lack of adequate physical activities, and parental supervision, all recorded by Hegwick, Harisha, and Gordon Larson. The Center for Disease Control defines obesity as a body mass index of greater than 30. If we look at the chart, you can look up your height in inches and your corresponding weight to get your body mass index. Poverty and poverty thresholds are calculated for statistical purposes and are analyzed each year by the United States Census. I have provided information and a graph to the right regarding the number of persons in a family or household and the poverty guideline number that they would have to be under. Poor families tend to live in poor neighborhoods. Although families choose where they live and may select into a particular neighborhood context, lifestyle, and behavioral choices, food choices and dietary quality depend on the social environment in which food is sought and consumed. High diet quality foods can sometimes be more expensive and less accessible for those residing in economically deprived areas. Because food availability influences consumption, less wealthy minority neighborhoods are a distinct advantage regarding food choice. Supermarkets have been shown to be more likely to stock healthier foods at a lower cost than smaller grocery stores. Supermarkets provide the widest selection of food, including fresh produce and low-fat choices. Families that live near areas where supermarkets are more likely to meet the dietary guidelines for fruits and vegetables, total fat, and saturated fat consumption. Unfortunately, many of people live in the area that lack supermarkets, and family who lives in these areas may have to rely on a nearby corner store. Most of these corner stores are able to sell tobacco, but only 2/3 of these stores sell any produce. Studies by Wickrama, and Bryant concluded that fast food is more accessible than healthier fare in certain neighborhoods. The relative proximity of fast foods has made it a regular part of children's diets. Living in neighborhoods in which fast food restaurants are more accessible than grocery stores directly affects residents' health. Those who live in food tracts with greater accessibility to fast food restaurants than grocery stores had higher rates of diet-related death. Poor communities are unable to meet their residents' dietary health needs. Unaffordable prices can limit access to proper food in poor communities, and poor communities have a greater number of unhealthy fast food restaurants. Fast food consumption relying on restaurants is likely to promote more meals or increased consumption of high-fat meals, leading to higher caloric intake. Wu and Wang also bring up the effect that ratio of fast food to full-service restaurants at the county level increases the potential for obesity by having fewer choices. Low-income families with proportionally higher costs of living have less money for food, which encourages a propensity for inexpensive but high-caloric foods. Less expensive but more convenient fast food, smaller family size, and pervasive advertising of food service establishments have increased the portion of total energy obtained from restaurants and fast food establishments and decreased the portion obtained from home. Over 25 million students use the National School Lunch Program daily. 7 million use the National School Breakfast daily. Meals from these programs may constitute more than half the daily caloric intake from children who participate in both programs, particularly for those from low-income families. Due to the fact that pediatric obesity is more prevalent in lower socioeconomic groups, such children from these groups may be influenced more significantly by the content of these free or discounted meals. Over the past 4 decades, local budgetary changes have began forcing schools to move the preparation of school meals to off-site locations, thus relinquishing the nutritional control over cafeteria meals once held by on-site food preparation staff. Eventually, the traditional school cafeteria was transformed from an adequately funded, large-scale kitchen where food is prepared by skilled staff to merely a final site of assembly for pre-cooked food products which require minimally trained staff. As a result of this, according to a 2007 USDA report, fewer than 1/3 of U.S. public schools were able to meet the recommended standard for either total or saturated fat in their meals. I have provided a chart over here that shows that vending machines in schools must provide breakfast and lunch program choices. These must meet with USDA standards for both food and drink. You can click on the link over here to find out. The industry of food and beverages sales is a narrow profit margin for business. As the variety of food products expand, the competition for each food dollar of the U.S. consumer is increased. Eventually, food manufacturers realize that children are more than just passive recipients of the food their parents choose. Instead, children were increasingly seen as consumers. We see that between childhood obesity, there is an increased availability of calorie-dense processed foods which are marketed directly to children. A 2004 study also found out that food-related television advertising made up 26% of the advertised products. Marketing campaigns started targeting children specifically. Another factor contributing to pediatric obesity is the emergence of direct marketing and sales of food to the children inside of schools, but outside the school federal lunch program. This can be found in the vending machines. Soft drinks have been sold in schools since the 60s, by use in vending machines or at concession stands and events. The school receives commissions and bonus payments for this, and the brands advertised is on campus. Recess has been used as an opportunity for physical exercise, which is a key component in preventing childhood obesity. Recently, PE has been limited in some schools due to restrictions for space and time as they apply for waivers. I've provided a link here. Neighborhood safety issues. Hedwig, Harissa, Gordon Larson proposed that low-income boys might engage in more physical activity playing outside than low-income girls who tend to stay inside. They stated that obese adolescent living in a poor family may face additional barriers to engaging in physical activity and healthy eating if a person lives in a poor neighborhood with higher crime rates and less access to healthy food. Therefore, family poverty and neighborhood poverty both serve to reinforce the continuity of obesity from adolescence into young adulthood. Several studies suggested that neighborhood poverty is associated with exposure to social and economic environments that are conducive to physiological stress, and living in a higher poverty neighborhood is associated with a range of negative factors from pollution and environmental toxins to violence exposure and over-policing. In urban areas, children in inner city neighborhoods are engaged in less physical activities than those in suburban areas. They have more anxiety about neighborhood safety and may deter physical activity, which would help explain a higher obesity rate in the inner city areas, according to Zhu and Wang. At the most basic level, weight gain is a result of energy intake and energy expenditure. Physical activity and inactivity are important biological determinants to obesity. Inactivity, and particularly TV viewing, has been associated with obesity in cross-sectional studies of children and adolescents. Physical activity habits, and specifically inactivity, track significantly from adolescence and adulthood. Because bored children have fewer opportunities for exercise or organized participation, we expect physical activity will mediate the effects of poverty on the obesity. Socioeconomically disadvantaged parents are more likely to transmit their unhealthy eating behaviors, their lack of exercise, and risky lifestyles to their offspring. Choices that parents make about their lifestyles affect their child's life too. Parents' eating behaviors and parents' practices influence the development of their child's eating behaviors. When children live at home, parents establish and monitor their lifestyles, including what and when they eat, and their levels of physical activity. Consumption of meals with family members increases the quality of adolescents' diets. When parents' monitoring lowers the number of non-nutrition foods chosen to children and the total caloric content of meals, parent monitoring also influences the regularity of meals, including breakfast, which increases the risk of obesity when skipped. Poor parents are less able to monitor their child's diet and dietary patterns and physical activities due to the stress and time constraints of work. Mothers who work full-time are less able to check on their children due to the increase in work and a decrease in presence availability during the day. Tamar Haspel from the Washington Post says that her data does not support the fact that the poorest are the fattest. She claims that the middle class is the fattest. She spoke with Craig Gunderson, an economist at the University of Illinois who studies the SNAP program. He says he believes that it's generally the case that if you gave poor people more money, they'd be less likely to be obese. He says that SNAP recipients have the same or lower rates of obesity compared to SNAP eligible people that don't get the benefits. It turns out that many experts disagree with her, claiming that SNAP recipients have worse diets and higher obesity rates. It all depends upon how you slice the data. According to her, it's the food environment, not poverty, that is the culprit that makes America increase in fat. From CNN, we hear from Jacqueline Howard, who states that there are encouraging new studies that show that the obesity rates have been declining significantly. This new information gives us hope that our efforts across the U.S. are making a difference. She states that these new updates in nutrition have led to the stores stocking healthier options and families now buying healthier foods. Scholarly journals and scientific data support the facts that most Americans, especially those that are below the poverty level or threshold, have an increased propensity to becoming obese, which is the exact opposite of these media reports. I believe that the media has an obligation to their sponsors and advertisers as opposed to the general public. They are taking money over health. The highest levels of obesity happen among the most underprivileged people. Efforts by the government should be made to provide more physical activities in poor neighborhoods and school districts. Supplemental food programs need to be monitored to make sure that the food meets minimum daily requirement and nutritional values. Food co-ops and sharing programs should be increased. Go green. Local lots can be turned into community gardens. Food donations should be accepted. Share tables should be set up at lunch so that no food gets thrown away. Home economic classes can be demonstrating how to prepare and help make some simple meals. Safe school and education hold the key to helping our poorest families survive. Policy changes that increase reasonably priced food and available nutrition and physical activity options in lower income neighborhoods are essential. It's tough to think on an empty stomach. The following are the works and journals cited, the media used, and the web pages presented. Thank you.